pleasure that I welcome all of you, and this is how the evening will progress, so all of you know what is coming. I will introduce the chair, Professor Michael Hutt, who is to the extreme right, and Dr. Dan Hirslund, who will be in conversation with Dr. Bhattrai, and then pass over the proceedings to Professor Hutt. Dr. Bhattrai will speak for some time, after which there will be a conversation amongst the panelists, and then we will open it up for all of you to ask questions. It is LSE's policy in all public and free events that we give preference to students to ask questions, and that there is a balance between questions asked by men and women. That doesn't mean that those who are not students and those are in any way discouraged, but please know that there is this slight prejudice in favor. It is now my very pleasant duty to introduce Professor Michael Hutt, who is Professor of Nepali and Himalayan Studies, and also the founding director of the South Asia Institute at the School of Oriental and African Studies. But for an intriguing gap of 3 years between 1984 and 1987, Professor Hutt seems to have spent all his time from his undergraduate days at SOAS. In this long association, he has held several important positions in that unique and world-renowned institution. My own association with him goes back to the mid-1990s, a time before I came to SOAS to do my PhD, and when he was editor of the South Asia Research, and I was a copy editor at Sage Publications. It is therefore particularly heartwarming for me to be able to welcome Professor Hutt here this evening. After completing his bachelor's degree in South Asian Studies, majoring in Hindi literature in 1980 from SOAS, Professor Hutt went on to do a PhD on the history of the Nepali language and its literature in 1984. He returned to SOAS as a British Academy postdoctoral fellow in 1987 and has since been engaged in teaching and research relating to Nepal and the Himalayas. He has been a member of the Executive Committee of the Britain-Nepal Academic Council ever since its foundation in 2000 and its chairman since 2010. He has also served 2 terms as editor of the European Bulletin of Himalayan Research and was appointed chair of the British Academy's South Asia Area Panel in 2014. Professor Hutt is best known for his several publications and translations from Nepali to English, but it is important to also note that he has published on Nepali and Bhutanese politics, the Nepali diaspora in India, Nepali art and architecture, and on Bhutanese refugees. In 2011, he was awarded the Naideruka International Prize for his continuous dedication to promoting the study of Nepali literature in the international arena. From next year, Professor Hutt begins a new and exciting project on the political and cultural impact of the very tragic earthquake in Nepal in 2015, which will include heritage reconstruction and the impact of earlier earthquakes on Nepal. Dr. Dan Hirslund is an anthropologist based at the University of Copenhagen at the Department of Cross-Cultural Studies, where he's pursuing a postdoctoral research project. At LSE, Dr. Hirslund's project is connected to the Inequality and Poverty program in the Department of Anthropology. After spending a year at the University of British Columbia in preparation for his Bachelor of Arts degree, Dan returned to Copenhagen to study the politics of conflict in South Asia, and from where he earned his bachelor's and master's degrees. He completed his PhD also from the University of Copenhagen in 2012, investigating the dynamics of post-revolutionary Maoism in Nepal. Since completing his PhD, Dr. Hirslund has increasingly been interested in connecting the political culture of post-conflict Nepal with the economic structure of class relationships and the transformation wreaked by the country's increasing integration into the global economy. In late 2014, Dan received a grant to study the solidarities for precarious labor in urban industries. I will now hand over to Professor Hutt, but I'd like to end with thanking the International Nepalese Society UK, who got in touch with us so that we were able to make this evening possible with Dr. Bhattrai.
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar, for a very, very kind introduction. I must admit I felt Despite fresh on excitement when he described me as sitting to the extreme right of Dr. Bhattrai. Dr. Bhattrai was born in Kottayam VDC, Gorkha district in Nepal, and he was educated at Amarjyoti High School in Lewintel, Gorkha, where he achieved the highest marks in his SLC exam of any student in Nepal that year, and then at Amrit Science College in Kathmandu. Then he managed to secure a Colombo Clan scholarship and studied for a Bachelor of Architecture in 1977 from Punjab University in Chandigarh. And it was during this time that he became the founding president of the All India Nepalese Students Association. Dr. Bhattrai continued his education in India and received a master's degree in planning from the Delhi School of Planning and Architecture in 1979, and the PhD from JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, in 1986. His PhD thesis was published by Adroit Publishers in Delhi in 2003 under the title The Nature of Underdevelopment and Regional Structure of Nepal, a Marxist Analysis. So Dr. Bhattrai was involved in student politics and left politics from his student days. And like many of Nepal's Maoist leaders, he stayed loyal to one of Nepal's foremost revolutionary ideologues, Mohan Bikram Singh, through the numerous splits and regroupings that occurred in Nepal's communist movement through the 1980s. As I'm sure you know, the 1990 Jan Andolan forced King Birendra to dismantle the panchayat system that had been in place since 1962 and to hold general elections under a new constitution in 1991. And with Dr. Bhattrai as its coordinator, the United People's Front, a political organisation representing a coalition of four smaller parties, now called the CPN Unity Centre, won 9 seats in Parliament. When this grouping split in 1994, Dr. Bhattrai aligned himself with the faction led by Pushkar Kamal Dahal, which in 1995 resolved not to participate in future elections, to rename itself the CPN Maoist, and to take up arms against the monarchical state in a people's war on behalf of the oppressed and the marginalised. Since this time, Dr. Bhattrai has played a very important role in the highly complex and for 10 years extremely violent process of political change and contestation in Nepal. Except during brief periods of ceasefire and negotiation, Dr. Bhattrai remained underground in Nepal and India, along with the rest of the senior Maoist leadership, until the peace settlement of 2006. In the Constituent Assembly elections of 2008, his party emerged as the largest single party, and as its leading ideologue, Dr. Bhattrai is widely credited for having written its manifesto. He himself was elected from his home constituency of Gorkha and became finance minister in a cabinet headed by Pushkar Kamal Dahal. His role in Nepali politics since the Comprehensive Peace Agreement has been very much an overground one, and it reached its pinnacle when he became Nepal's Prime Minister 2 short-lived governments later, in August 2011. However, the first Nepalese Constituent Assembly reached the end of its extended term of office in May 2012, and in March 2013 he was replaced by Chief Justice Kilraj Redmi at the head of a new interim government. Dr. Bhattrai was a senior standing committee member and vice chairperson of the Unified Communist Party of Nepal Maoist until his resignation from his post and from the party on the 26th of September 2015 after the promulgation of a controversial new constitution. And on 12th of July of this year, he announced the establishment of the Naya Shakti Nepal, the New Force Nepal, as a new political party under his leadership. So I'd like to just endorse what Dr. Sarkar has said. So it's a great privilege to have you here, sir, this evening, and to listen to what you have to say on the subject of new politics and policies for Nepal. So I will hand over the floor to you, sir.
Sarkar, Professor Michael Hart, Dr. Dan Arslan, distinguished professors, scholars, my young Nepali friends. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here to share my humble ideas with you. For me, it has been a great pleasure and honor to be in this esteemed institution, which I always admired and aspired to be in. If I had not been in a revolutionary movement, not gone underground to lead a violent insurgency, who knows, I would have been one of you here in this institution. Anyway, I am very proud to be here with you. You are never too old to set another goal, nor dream a new dream. C.S. Lewis very famously said. And I am 62, and I have a dream. I have a new dream, and that's why after 40 years in the communist movement and last 30 years in the Maoist movement, I resigned from my party after promulgating the new constitution, which I had the privilege to head the most important committee of Constitutional and Political Dialogue and Consensus Committee, and started a new journey. That's why I am here to talk about new politics and new policy for Nepal. In fact, I am not in a mood to talk, express my ideas with you. I am here to hear from you, especially from my young friends, what you have to say about the current politics in the global context, in the Nepalese context. Are you really satisfied with the old politics? Are my young friends who are in their 20s eager to join the old politics? Does this attract you? I am not sure. I have a daughter who is 30 years old. She followed us during the revolutionary movement. She had to bear a lot of hardships, and she is a quite bright student, but she herself is not very satisfied with the current political situation in Nepal. And I feel the new generation has a different dream than what we had in our time. So why is it so? The recent political developments in the UK after the Brexit, or the recent US election, president's election, what does that mean?
Change.
So in the most developed democratic countries in Europe and America, they have been questioned about the traditional politics. So in case of Nepal, which has just transitioned from old feudal, monarchical, autocratic state to a republican, democratic state, formally just last year, in the beginning of the 21st century. So I thought this is time to set another goal and to have another dream for my country. Because when I was a student in Chandigarh, in India, in past architecture at the age of 23, I had an opportunity to build a career. Then I realized when my country remains poor, when my people remain poor, when our young people have to migrate to foreign countries in search of jobs, what does it mean? Just one Baburam Bhattrai or somebody becomes an engineer or a doctor or a professional. So that's why I had joined the revolutionary movement when I was a student. You know, those days, we students, young people used to be fascinated by Che Guevara. He used to be our role model. So I had followed his path. And Nepal's context was, we didn't have even the rudiment of democracy. That time, autocratic monarchy was ruling in the 80s. So first goal was to do away with the autocratic panchayat system, which the king has floated. In 1990, we did away with that autocratic system, but monarchy still remained in power. People couldn't make their own constitution. We had a constitution, but that was promulgated by a committee nominated by the king. The people were not really sovereign, and given the past history of the autocratic kings of Nepal, there was every danger of our democratic gains being snatched away by the king again. So then that time we set another goal that time. Until the monarchy remains this autocratic state, monolithic state in a diversified Nepali society remains as it is, democracy won't be totally acceptable to the majority of the people. That won't be genuine democracy. That is just a formal democracy, but not the real democracy. That's why in 1996 we thought we have to lead another movement, and we started a People's War under the Maoist ideology, and you know what happened after that. Ultimately we managed to make the constitution, and I had the privilege to head the constitutional committee, and after promulgation of the constitution, we couldn't be fully satisfied, you know very well. After signing the document, I came out after the assembly, and I didn't join the rejoicing, I didn't join the festivities, and after a few days, I resigned from parliament and came out. And I thought now it's time to set another goal. Oh, whatever the constitution we have got, it has formally institutionalized democracy. The constitution is formally a federal democratic republic, but our people are not still happy with the constitution. Half of the population which lives in Tarai Madesh and is constitutes of Janjatis, Adivasi Janjati, what we call people of the Mongoloid stock living in the hills, they are not happy with it, and women and Dalits still don't feel happy about it. So they have reservations, and I had my solidarity with them. But still I signed the constitution because it formally institutionalized democracy. For the first time in Nepalese history, a elected constituent assembly had made the constitution. So that was a huge advancement in the democratic process. That gain has to be protected. That's why I signed the constitution. But I reserved my opinion, reservations against the deficiencies of the new constitution. So that was one of the reasons why I came out of the parliament and started a new process. Secondly, even after having the constitution and formally getting the political rights, the situation in my country, economic situation, had remained the same. Even now, Nepal is one of the poorest countries in the world. We are one of the least developed countries, and our per capita income is just about $700 a year. That means only about $2, our national income, our per capita income, only $2 a day, sorry. So here I suppose the workers in, I've read in paper whether it's true or not, some companies, they get about $15 per hour Per hour they get $15, and we Nepalese average get only $2 per day. That means our whole country is below the poverty line. And about 5 million people, our youths, are forced to migrate in search of jobs in other countries. So unless we change the scenario, we embark on a trajectory of rapid economic development and take the country to at least a middle level income within next 10-15 years, there is a big danger our whole country getting depopulated. Even in the countryside, if you go, I come from a rural background, most of the countryside is devoid of youths. Only old people and women, disabled people are in the country. So unless our country goes on a rapid developmental path, even then these democratic gains will be difficult to protect. So that is why our another goal what we have set is to bring about development and prosperity in this country in our own lifetime, not in the distant future. Because we have so many dreams which can be fulfilled in our lifetime. But this dream is achievable, to lead this country to a middle level income within the next 15 years and to a high level income within 25 years. It is achievable. So with this goal in mind, we have embarked on a new path, floated a new party called the Naya Shakti, and persons like Mr. Madan Rai, who is a known agriculture scientist from Nepal, and there are others of different non-political background and some of political affiliation with other parties. We have come together and started this new political formation. So our idea is twofold. Firstly, this democracy needs to be developed further. In Nepal's case, with so much of heterogeneity, with ethnic, gender, Dalit, regional inequality, diversity, our democracy has to be more inclusive. All should get their role, their share of proper sharing in the state power. Secondly, the democracy, whatever we have had so far, is only formal. People get the right to elect their representative every 4 years, but after that they don't have any say in the management of state affairs. So we want to develop democracy such a way that is really participatory. People will have their say even after electing their representatives. If the representatives make mistakes, they will have a right to recall them and they will have a right to intervene, and they can really participate in the state affairs. This type of participatory democracy we want to develop. This is our first goal. Secondly, we want to focus on economic development. We want to mobilize our natural and human resources in such a way that within 5 to 7 years we can eradicate poverty. Within 15 years we can raise the country to a middle level income, and within 25 years our country can be one of the richest countries in the world. With this view in mind, we have started this political formation. And naturally the question arises, what's new about it? Because every political party has a political ideology, philosophy, and naturally you would be asking this question, what will be the philosophy and ideology of this party? So this is here I want your views. Because the traditional political ideology followed in the last 200-300 years, dominated liberal or neoliberal ideology or politics, is facing a tremendous crisis. I I think the current recent American president election is a case in point. People in the most developed democratic world are themselves not satisfied with the working of liberal and neoliberal democracy. They are voting against the old political parties, old leadership. I think this shows the traditional liberal democracy is in crisis. And on the other hand, in the 20th century, the socialism came out as a strong alternative to liberalism and neoliberalism. Almost half of the world was ruled under the name of socialism, led by the Soviet Union and China. But what happened? Soviet Union has already discarded socialism. And China, though still they call themselves communist, what they are practicing is neither communism nor capitalism, something else they have been practicing. So, we want to go to working, and the traditional state socialism is not working. So, we are trying to go beyond both liberalism and state socialism and find a correct ideological, philosophical position suited to the demands of the 21st century and to the concrete demands of Nepal. We are on a discussion. So you will call what we would like to call it. We have called it enhanced socialism. We have yet to define it correctly, but what we mean is, with the traditional liberalism, which gives primacy to individual rights, has led to tremendous inequality. But the traditional state socialism is devoid of democracy, is devoid of human face. So we want such a system of a sort of socialism which will be more participatory, which will honor and promote individual rights, as well as it will take care of social good and the collective rights. And the other factor we want to join in this is, apart from the individual right and the class right, the question of identity or the rights of the communities, especially the oppressed nationalities, women and Dalits, especially in our part of the world, which is not, it doesn't come under the individual right nor with the class right. It's something else. You can say group right, community right. So this type of socialism should be the ideology in the political philosophy in the 21st century. This has been our understanding. But we are working on it. So in this discussion, I would like to have feedbacks from you. And about the economic model, we are working on it. Same, neither the traditional capitalistic model, leaving everything to the market, will work in the countries like ours, nor the traditional or the well already discarded state socialism will work. So we'll have to find a correct economic model to suit our nation. And the third aspect we are focusing on is about clean politics. Politics has been so much corrupted. The whole political class has been identified with corruption, that the new generation has no interest in joining politics. That has been one of the reasons. That's why we want to have clean politics and good governance. Only then it can lead a new politics and to new policies. These are the new issues we have raised. But the other factor in Nepal's case is the geopolitical factor. It may not be important here in Europe and America, but in a country like Nepal, sandwiched between the huge states of India and China, the geopolitical factor matters. If you want to embark on the path of rapid economic development, if you don't have a correct policy to deal with both India and China, it will be very difficult to develop independently. Already, if you see our economy, we are fully dependent on India. More than 2/3 of our trade takes place with India, and we are dependent on India on all basic imports, and that's why times again leads to embargo, blockade, like it happened last year. But we have faced thrice, I myself have faced 3 blockades in my lifetime. So this is because of total dependency on one country. So, but how do we diversify our economy? So this is another challenge we are facing in new politics and new economics of Nepal. So that's why we have floated a new idea that traditionally Nepal has been regarded as a yam between 2 boulders. In Nepal we call Dui Dhunga ko Beach ko Tarul, like Prithviraj Shah, the founder king of Nepal, very famously said. But I think that image has to be changed now. We are in the 21st century, where tremendous technological revolution, communication revolution had taken place. The Himalayas are no longer impregnable barriers. So Nepal now should develop itself as a vibrant bridge between India and China. Roads and railway networks can be built through Himalayas without antagonizing India, without playing one neighbor against the other. Nepal can play a middle role or act as a bridge between 2 huge states of India and China and take advantage of huge markets on both sides. That will be to the advantage of Nepal. Once we develop economically, have an interdependent economy, then we can come out of this dependency. So this is another aspect of our new politics and new economy we are trying to build up in Nepal. Friends, these are the initial thoughts I will share with you. But of course, when you set a new task, it's always a daunting task. It's not that easy. But given my experiences of my life, because nobody believed monarchy could be abolished from Nepal. For the last 250 years, it has been ruling. And it was ruling under the guise of an avatar of Vishnu, incarnation of Lord Vishnu. And nobody thought monarchy could be abolished, but we did it. It is basically the Maoist insurgency, Maoist people's war, cut the roots of feudalism from their countryside and enabled the evolution of monarchy, and the old centralized state has now been able to be federated on the basis of identity of various oppressed nationalities, and the Hindu state has been converted into secular state. This we have made possible in our own lifetime. So I think it's possible Nepal can emerge as a prosperous and developed country, and we can have a better, vibrant, inclusive and participatory democracy, and we can join the advanced and developed countries in the 21st century. With this dream in mind, at the age of 62, along with my friend Manan Rai, who is nearing 70, and our young friends who are only 20, 25, we have joined hands and try to lead another revolution, not a violent revolution, very peaceful revolution towards enhanced socialism and a prosperous Nepal. This is our dream. I appeal to you, you should, I can see lot of Nepalese young friends, you should contribute how to make this project a success. So I would like to hear from you. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. Bhattrai, for giving us that introduction to your vision of the new party and covering the various areas of concern and priority. Dr. Hirschland and I have a number of questions prepared for you, which perhaps relate to that and relate to other issues, to do with your political history and your career. So I'll hand over first to Dan.
Shall I get up, or can you hear me?
Can you hear okay at the back?
Yeah, fine.
You should get up.
So first of all, I'd like to thank Yuranga and the organizers for inviting me, and of course Baburam Bhattrai for coming and sharing his thoughts that I thought were really inspiring. And I want to say that next time we invite you, Dr. Bhattrai, we want to ask you to speak about our political and economic challenges in Europe, because I hope that you can give us some ideas of where we should go, because you're not the only country who has problems. My position here is slightly difficult because I'm supposed to ask difficult questions, because Dr. Bhattrai is such a leading figure in the development of the political transformation of Nepal, and indeed you have overseen huge transformation in the history of Nepal in such a short period that your experience commands us to really think big thoughts about what are the kind of things we had to think about, where can we go next. And I think the way you outlined the politics of your party were really inspiring. So what I want to try to do is ask three broad lines of questions that touch upon these issues, and hopefully they will also act as a bridge to your questioning for Bhattrai later. So my first question concerns the broad lines of political transformation in Nepal. And I think when we think about the recent political changes in Nepal and prospects for a more equitable policy, with which you have been very admirably involved, it seems that there are two different schools of thought. One locates the dynamics of political transformation within a theory on capitalist expansion and imperialism. According to this view, challenges of democratizing the country's polity and developing its economy requires an attention to conflicts between classes, as well as to the international geopolitical context that you just mentioned, wherein alliances between transnational elites are forged and sustained. I believe this perspective is elegantly captured in your work on underdevelopment, which characterizes a structural position of disadvantage, one that cannot simply be addressed through changes in behavior, but requires a changed environment as obstacles to be overcome. Now, the other school of thought on democracy and development does not speak of underdevelopment, but rather of undevelopment. I think you spoke of it as liberalism and neoliberalism. I think they fit very well together. This is a crucial distinction because it allows for the state and non-governmental actors to be cast as mediators in the unfolding of human potentiality and to wield powers of capital and institutions to bring formerly excluded sectors into the orbits of growth. Whereas underdevelopment addresses the state as the nexus of the problem, undevelopment looks to a liberalized economy and the potentialities of growth. One focuses on power, the other on a particular model of the economy. I'm aware that for the sake of argument, I am painting something of caricature positions that are obviously much more complex and which may also overlap on decisive issues. Yet it seems to me that one of the crucial lines of conflict is the question of class. Whether or not that figures in the analysis, and whether or not one sees the state and capital as weapons wielded by some classes to suppress others, or as more or less neutral mediums of potentiality and limitless inclusion. Put in another way, do we see the solutions to poverty and inequality as primarily political or as primarily economical? in which case we can let market forces take care of it. So my first question revolves around how you see the relationship between these two schools of thought in the context of Nepal's political transformation in recent decades. Do you think there's a case to be made for the argument that the Maoist revolution evidenced the eruption of a class-based critique of the state, whereas the post-CPA period can largely be understood as a subsumption of this critique within a more liberal conceptualization of political change? If you think this is the case, then what has your own role been in this process? How do you see the relationship between these two traditions of analysis today? And lastly, is there a risk that with the taming of Maoism, we are also losing an important resource for analyzing marginalization and poverty as something more than merely failed inclusion soon to be redressed?
I think maybe we could take 2 or 3 questions.
Shall we?
Would you prefer to respond to those immediately?
What do you think?
All
All right. I can just quickly summarize that again. The question is whether you think Maoism has completely lost its relevance as a critique of class-based politics, or whether we're moving into a post- or anti-Maoism politics, where the question of class had become irrelevant and we only focus on the economy and growth through market forces. That was my first question. I'll go on to the next 2 ones, and they're shorter. So the second question, the set of questions, relates to the question that you raised very well about the role of new youth and the kind of political form that we're looking into. I think there's a very interesting shift around in party politics that seems to have taken place mainly in the past decade, and where you also seem to be in the lead. This has to do with the emergence of civil society leaders that are not allied with traditional political parties, but combine a spirit of business acumen with a desire to bring about the change that the state is apparently unwilling or unable to do. I think one of the key figures there is Sujit Shakya, but many others have also contributed to this change. And Naya Shakti, as you mentioned yourself, is also very interested in taking up this challenge about a corrupt political platform. So I find this development extremely interesting. On the one hand, it builds on the general critique of gerontological and party-based hold on state institutions, the kind of politics that youth today don't want to go into, as you said very well. And in one light, I think we can see the Maoist war as a kind of a violent procedure for enlarging the franchise in a context where politics was otherwise associated with an urban elite. On the other hand, this continuity in refocusing political inclusion on youth populations also evidences a break from poor and uneducated groups to educated and, by extension, urban and middle-class ones. I would like to hear your thoughts on this political shift and how you think it might be beneficial to the country. Clearly, addressing the challenges of how to integrate new generation, their criticism of the political establishment with their traditional power structures, where does this lead the non-educated youth? Where will they go for politics? Will a new kind of politics trickle down to become relevant for them as well, or is there risk that political change, like modernity itself, will come in a two-track version, a fast one for the rich and a slower one for the poor? Or are we seeing a return of class-based politics, but one which favors the middle classes as a solution to the failure of uniting elite and working classes in a common political project? So lastly, and shorter than the first 2 questions, I'm sorry, is the question of economic development that you raised so well, and I think which requires, of course, a lot more discussion to be solved. I'm not going to go much through the situation Nepal has faced recently, but obviously Nepal is in a situation where it's part of the global economy, and it's founded on a great external debt that it has to import capital to be able to pay off. So from your time as a Prime Minister, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on how you see Nepal's economic potential in an increasingly globalized economy. And I ask this question in the context of 1, a failed agricultural revolution, which would maybe have made the country food sufficient. 2, the meager levels of industrial development, owing in large part to the country's topography and competition from India, you mentioned that yourself, and significantly, contemporary plans to develop special economic zones to serve as a production hub for rich countries. I think this is part of the idea of being a bridge between China and India. Two of the important pillars of Nepal's current economy are, as far as I understand it, remittances and foreign aid. But with the planned advancement of the country from a least developed to a middle-income country, the structural advantage of both of these sectors will fall away. What are your visions for how to address these challenges? Do they involve more integration into the global economy, or rather measures of self-sufficiency? If industrial capitalism is the road to Nepal's success, as you have indicated in other contexts, how are they going to be combined with industries and working class conditions that do not scare away investors? So lastly, what do you see as the best way for Nepal to accommodate to the current overabundance of cheap capital that is now flowing cheaply into the country, but which might also make it more vulnerable to external economic contraction? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm interrupting just to make an announcement. We have almost 1,000 people following the live streaming, a lot of whom are in Nepal, and it is very late now in the night. So once the question and answer starts, please could I request all of you to be quick and precise, and could I request your answers to be short so we can take in as many as we can. There are people who are actually staying awake in the middle of the night to hear this.
Thank you, Dan Aslan. I think you have touched a very vast arena. If I go into what I've heard about your question or manage to note down, I think I'll need quite some time to reply. Nobody is prepared to wait. So I'll try to be very brief. If I have heard you correctly, if I have not heard correctly, then you should correct me. Firstly, as far as I understand, the theoretical question of developmental path, development, question of non-development and underdevelopment, these are the, as far as I remember, I have already abandoned my thesis for the last 30 years. So these words, if I remember correctly, non-development is like original sin, which is assigned to countries like ours, because we are poor because we are poor. That type of logic advanced by a section of economists, development economists, we say we have to open more to the outside world, follow a liberal path or follow a capitalistic path, join with the global economy, then you will develop. We are not developed because we are not joined with the foreign market or the external market. So that means we have to follow the traditional capitalistic path. And the other view with regards economic condition of our country like Nepal is underdevelopment. That means it's a development of underdevelopment. Because of the external factor, we had a very adverse relation with global economy or the more developed metropolitan economy of Europe and America, which dominated the economy of the third world country like ours. We were caught into a dependency syndrome, and we were underdeveloped because of that. Our natural path of growth was blocked, distorted, so that's why we were under. This is another theory. I did subscribe to the latter theory. My whole PhD thesis is based on that. I studied the dependency theory and then try to follow a classical Marxist, anti-imperialist method to find a new path of development for a country like Nepal. So after 30 years of writing that thesis, what now I believe in is, I still believe country like ours were pushed backward because of our adverse relation with economy which is more developed like Europe and Americas. In South Asia also, till the 17th century, Nepal was not that backward compared to other countries. Only when we were caught in this unequal relation, we were pushed backward. I think that is the reality. But given the fast technological and economic development and policy followed in the last 20 years, especially after the 80s, when there is more of integration between the economies, then now, and the fall of the old, failure of the old socialistic model. Now, I am of the view that for a country like Nepal, for some time, not forever, for some time, we'll have to open, we'll have to integrate with the outside economy, lead to a certain level of development, but then state also will have to play a regulatory role so that we are not caught in the unequal relationship and lead to another cycle of underdevelopment. But first of all, we will have to do away with the absolute poverty and backwardness. We will have to develop the productive forces at least to a certain level. That's why we will need to develop in a phase, we will go through a phase of industrial capitalistic development. But that industrial capitalistic development will have to be oriented towards socialism. So a mixture of socialism and capitalism will have to be followed in the initial stage. But slowly, after we reach a certain stage of capitalistic development or development of the productive forces, in the later stage, we will have to transit to a new enhanced form of socialism. This is my idea of development for Nepal. But for the initial phase, we will have to open up the economy, we will have to unleash the productive forces, give more role to the private sector, we will have to invite foreign investment in technology, but the state will have to play a regulatory role. So I think this type of model will have to follow. So in that sense, I don't see the Marxist philosophy has totally lost its relevance, but the model of Marxism, especially Maoism we followed, may not be practical and applicable at this moment. Maybe in the future, we can think of that. Maybe my daughter's generation can think about it. At least in my generation, if I have to eradicate poverty and unemployment in Nepal and raise Nepal to a certain stage of economic development, we will have to follow an industrial capitalistic development path, but guided or led towards a socialist path. So this type of economic policy will have to follow, and if I made my point correctly, the traditional Maoism cannot be practiced right now. We will have to find our own model, but that doesn't mean the unbridled neoliberal path also will be any good for a country like us. So we will have to find our own path. And as per the other question of various groups in society, or various classes in society, of course, we have not seen society being divided only in class, only two-class assumption which Karl Marx made in the case of Europe doesn't apply in the modern day economy. We are having various intermediate class, especially the middle class, which we can call a middle class. We see huge presence of that. Instead of the capitalist and the working class, the middle class, the intermediate class presence is more pronounced in the economy these days. This will have to taken into consideration in general, but in context of Nepal, where we still have a peasant economy, we can not just go by the traditional division of class only. So that's why we'll have to take other non-class factor as well, plus we'll have to accept the existence of multi-class society, and we'll have to devise our policy accordingly. And on the question of foreign capital and foreign aid, naturally we'll be needing foreign aid and foreign capital, but we can't be totally dependent on that. There are many of the economies who have been very much relying on foreign aid and foreign capital have been totally been dependent and not been able to develop their own resources and human capital. So we should basically rely on our own resources, internal, natural and human resources, but as a subsidiary role can be assigned to foreign capital and foreign technology. But basically we'll have to stand on our own, mobilize our own resources, especially the human resources, but the foreign aid and foreign direct investment can play a supplementary role, and we can't totally do away. This is my understanding. I think this is what I would like to say about it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Looking at the clock, we have to finish at 8, so I think rather than using up any of my own questions, I think it's time to open this to the floor. So what I propose to do is to take 3 questions from the floor and ask you to take them in batches rather than doing them one by one. May I please, for brevity, so very short questions, because we've come to hear Dr. Bhattrai, not other people. First person in front, right front, please. If you could also just say briefly who you are.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattrai. My name is Nihira Sood. I'm a PhD student from India. I'm very interested in Nepal relations. My question to you is, you mentioned your dissatisfaction with the Constitution in terms of Janjatis, women, Dalits, etc. I was wondering if you could elaborate, why did you feel that that Constitution was imperfect? Why did you feel that your own party was not a good platform to address those imperfections? And what is your party's vision on those specific imperfections that you perceived?
The last part I didn't.
What is your party's vision on those specific imperfections that you perceived in the Constitution?
Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Daisy from SOAS. Thank you, Dr. Bhattrai. It's very popular.
I didn't hear the name.
Daisy. Just wanted to ask, isn't there a contradiction, and I'm sure you've heard it before, between wanting to get to develop productive forces and wanting to get to this middle income status and being having a critique of anti-neoliberalism or being an anti-neoliberal party? I mean, one has to ask at what cost do you develop? I mean, many countries have developed, but at the cost of huge suffering amongst the working population. And I suppose in relation to that, my 2 specific questions would just be, can you tell us what specific anti-neoliberal policies Naya Shakti is adopting or would adopt? And secondly, what kind of oppositional politics, mass-based politics, is the party going to engage in?
Okay, so right at the back, please.
I'm Sashi Manandar. Like Dr. Bhattrai, I attended ASCOL 46 years ago, and I would like to credit the Maoists in abolishing the monarchy, and I'd like to congratulate them. But what I want to ask is, they followed the shining path and the communist ideology to bring equality between the social classes and to change in the part of the world where that is historical. And I want to know from Dr. Bhattrai, have they achieved that in the present climate? Would you say, given that to the very low classes, untouchables, to feel that they are included in this, the war, the people's war, and why did they come into the mainstream politics? Has anything been achieved that the Maoists wanted to achieve? And the third question is,
I'm going to limit everybody to one question each.
The earthquake scenario, which I thought was all about, the expansion in the roads in Kathmandu. Did you feel afterwards, after the earthquake, that the money would have been better spent? And the money is not being still spent in the earthquake issues. And where is this going? Thank you.
So we have the imperfections of the Constitution, the cost of development, the contradictions in the position, and then a string of questions. And I think perhaps the one we want to take up on is the post-earthquake reconstruction issue in this instance.
As per Ms. Su's, I had correctly question, dissatisfaction with the Constitution. Basically dissatisfied on two counts. Firstly, though we decided to go up to federate a state on the basis of ethnic identities, and we are demarcated, in fact we have decided 5 criteria of identity and 4 criteria of capabilities. We didn't stick to that. In the first Constituent Assembly, the State Restructuring Committee, and there was one State Restructuring Commission under the interim constitution. It was unanimously decided that the ethnic groups and linguistic groups who enjoy more than 1% of the population, they would be given an autonomous state in the areas of their historical habitation. That was the criteria fixed. If you had followed that criteria, Nepal should have had at least 9 or 10 federal units, which would have given autonomous states to all these Madhesi, Janajati, Thadu groups, and there shouldn't have been dissatisfaction. So this mistake we made, we should have avoided by whatever was decided by the first Constituent Assembly. So this is one count of dissatisfaction, and this voice has been raised by the Madhesis, Janajatis and the Tharus, and I stand by them. And this, why not the old party? Because my old party had completed its mission, that's my understanding. We abolished the monarchy, we had got a republican state, at least in theory. We had a federal democratic republican constitution, and the constitution was promulgated by the elected Constituent Assembly. So there, this part, this credit mostly goes to my old party. But to go beyond that, my old party will have to be fundamentally transformed into a new outfit with a new ideology and new political line, which the old leadership refused to do it. I tried my best for at least 1.5 years. This idea of Naya Shakti I had already floated within that party. And when I didn't see any chance of that party getting transformed, I had to leave it and go alone from that party to float a new or Naya Shakti. And specific imperfection, I already told you that's one. And the second, my reservation is the type of form of governance and the electoral system we have followed in the new constitution, that will never give a majority to any government. So that's why there is political instability. Every 9 months government gets changed, and with this sort of instability we'll never have economic development and prosperity. For that, I stand by my earlier conviction and position that we should have had a directly elected executive head, most preferably the president, if not the directly elected prime minister. That should have been the best bet for Nepal. This is the mistake we have made, and this needs to be corrected. As per the economic development policy, after development of the productive forces, whether that will benefit the working, if I have correctly understood you, will that benefit the working population? So there is always a contradiction in growth and equity. As I told you earlier, in Nepal, per capita income is so low, social wealth is so low, if you distribute to all, everybody gets poor. This is the situation in Nepal. So before focusing on distribution, we'll have to create wealth first, and then we'll give due importance, attention to distributive justice as well. So that in the first phase, give more emphasis on growth and secondary importance to distribution. And after reaching a certain stage of development of productive forces, when you have created enough wealth, then you can give more attention to distribution. So that's what exactly happened in the old socialist state. They gave more importance to distribution, and ultimately they failed to increase production, and socialism was identified as just distribution of poverty, which was not the intention earlier. So that's why this needs to be modified, and we have to make a judicious mix of growth and equity, but in the first phase you will have to give more importance to growth. This is my understanding. What mass politics we are following is naturally if you believe in inclusive and participatory democracy, you will have to mobilize the basic masses of the people, not only around specific issues, but in running the state affairs afterwards also. You will have to mobilize the masses of the people. We have to find certain mechanism whereby the masses of the people have a role to play, so that the democracy becomes vibrant. It doesn't get status and bureaucratic as happened earlier. So I strongly believe in mobilization of the masses, and but the form of mass mobilization will have to work out. And Shashi Manandar, as far as I have understood, if I have understood your question correctly, of course we achieved our goal of abolition of monarchy, getting the republic, but what about the aspirations of the poor or the deprived classes, the people? Have they got any benefit out of it? If that is your question, of course not. But the new constitution what we have made have very good provisions, at least in theoretical sense. In the fundamental rights, if you see in the constitution, we have had education, health, food, shelter as a fundamental right of every citizen of Nepal. But in theory, legally, everybody will get the benefits. But the country, as long as it remains poor, but how will you fulfill these constitutional obligations? So in theory, these poor people also will get from this constitution, but in practice, as long as the country remains poor, they won't get it. So that's why we are focused on economic development, economic growth, and after a certain stage, when we have enough development of productive forces, then we can provide distributive justice to all sections of the people. So right now your question is right, we won't be able to do it, but if you follow the correct policy of economic development, then soon in the future we will achieve our goal. So that's why we have shifted a new goal, fixed a new goal for the Naya Shakti, and this is where the Naya Shakti differs from my old party. And about the earthquake, money not spent, you are very correct. More than 500,000 houses were totally destroyed, and another 3,000 houses were partially destroyed. And to reconstruct, we needed about $10 billion. About $4 billion were pledged by the international community within 2 months of the earthquake. But after 1.5 years, we have not utilized even 10% of that amount of money. So government has totally failed on this account, and you are very right. The money has not been correctly spent, and the reconstruction is moving in a very slow, snail pace, and people are still suffering. So I fully agree with you. This situation should be changed. The people who have suffered from earthquake, they should get immediate grants from the government, which they had promised but not done so far. I fully agree with you. Thank you.
So many hands. Lady behind the laptop, number 1. Gentleman in the centre, number 2. Lady in front here, number 3. So you please first.
Thank you. Julia Lovell from Birkbeck College, University of London. Thank you, Dr. Bhattrai, for your very interesting presentation. It's well known that in the previous part of your career, intellectual, ideological and political influences from China are very, very important. But hearing about your aspiration to create middle income prosperity in Nepal reminds me very strongly of the aspiration of the post-Mao government in China to create a so-called Xiaokang Shehui, so a moderately prosperous society. Do you think you will borrow experience, you will look very carefully and borrow experience from China after Mao, and if so, what will you use? So will China continue to be a source of inspiration?
Thank you, Dr. Bhattrai, for your aspiring talk. In Nepal, after 1990s democracy, we have seen more than 80 parties established, each party with an objective to develop the country. Oh, sorry, my name is Sanjay Suba. Sanjay Suba. So after 1990s, we have seen lots of political parties in Nepal, each to develop the country, make the country more forward-looking, and every party established with a more revolutionary idea than the others. But once this political party comes into the power, they mostly fail to deliver what they promised to do. Even your previous party. So my question is, so what is the reason behind this failure of this party to deliver what they promised to deliver once they are in power? And the second one is, why this Naya Shakti party will be an exception, given the fact that you are part of that process in the past? Thank you.
Sneha Shrestha, Masters of Law at King's College London. Also the daughter of your ex-party member. Surendra Shrestha. Okay, so I'd just like to ask, okay, so the main reason that I'm in England is definitely because of the conflict lot that I do want to do back in the country, but dual citizenship is not allowed yet. So I wanted to ask if that was in the agenda at all, if it's actually going to be taken up. And you talked a lot about globalization and opening the market, so I wondered whether we could be able to help. I mean, from as an NRN. Also, the issue of climate change is quite a big issue, and I was wondering if issues like that will be thought of in the next Naya Shakti Party.
I have to hurry up. Well, of course, many people believe since the old party was called Maoist, we had a lot of inspiration from China. Naturally, we drew inspiration from, ideological inspiration from Mao, but we follow the exact policy of the Chinese government. We had reservation with the Chinese government. You know it very well. But of the post-Mao China, the development path they have followed. So are we drawing inspiration from them? Me, yes and no both. Yes, in the sense they have opened their economy. It's not in the traditional old Marxist state-controlled system. So in that sense, yes. No, in the sense that there is still, because they are one-party government, whole Communist Party controls everything. But in our case, that is neither possible nor desirable. So we believe we'll have to go through multi-party democracy. Only the Communist Party can rule in Nepal. So even if somebody wants, I've already left that party, even if my old party wants, it can follow the policy as practiced by China. Because we'll have to work within the multi-party framework. In that sense, we won't be able to follow, even if somebody wants the path of China. But whatever the development path, especially opening up with the outside world, that policy I do appreciate. About the next question, when the party comes to power and then later on they fail to deliver, I thought Professor Arnold Toynbee, I think he was a renowned professor of LSE. He has once said, I don't remember the exact quote, but what he said was, people who make revolution generally do fail in the next phase of reconstruction or construction of society. To do away with the old regime, they play a leading role, revolutionaries play a leading role, but the revolutionaries cannot lead the task of construction and development of economy. That's what he said. I think this generally applies everywhere. So in our case also, all the parties, that be Nepali Congress or the UML or the Maoist Center or the Madhesis, mostly these parties were formed to fight against the old autocratic system. So in a different stage, they were all revolutionary forces. So once they went to power, they couldn't change their working style and they couldn't deliver. I think there the Professor Toynbee is right. So we'll have to learn lesson from that. As per myself, being a part of old Maoist party, can I deliver in Naya Shakti? That's a big question, but I'm trying my hard. And that's why I said, at the age of 62, I have taken this plunge, and famous artist Pablo Picasso has very sarcastically said, one starts to get young at the age of 60. So I have started getting young at this age. And as per Neha Shrestha's question, can people who are outside Nepal can definitely. That's why I have been here. I have been to Korea, I have been to Japan, into Hong Kong, and I came to England to especially appeal to the Nepalese diaspora who have been living here have good experience, knowledge. These people, if they go back to Nepal or make investment in Nepal, they can contribute a lot for the development of the country. And I fully agree with you. People like you can do a lot for Nepal, and I request you, I appeal to you, you should go back to Nepal, and you are most welcome there to contribute for the development of this country. Thank you.
I'm told by our hosts that we can run over a little bit beyond 8 o'clock because clearly there's a lot of questions still to be asked. If I may ask one question myself before I take the floor. On Thursday of this week at SOAS, we have our annual lecture about Britain Nepal Academic Council, and this year it's being delivered by Mandira Sharma from Advocacy Forum, and she's talking on the subject of transitional justice. So I think, as we all know, the unfinished business of the conflict is much of it remains unfinished, and there are people in positions of authority in Nepal who are known to have allegations against them of human rights abuses during that period. So I'd be grateful to know your views on the question of transitional justice, delivered or not delivered, as the case may be. That's question one. I can only see men's hands up at the moment. Let's have one of each. On the left here, and gentleman here, please.
My name is Brian Whitmarsh. I'm a PhD student at SOAS. My question is quite specific, so I apologise to the audience, but I'm appealing to your background as an architect. So you laid the foundation stone for the Republic monument in the grounds of the Marriott Palace in 2012. Based on what you've said today, do you still identify with the need to memorialise the founding activities of the Republic with a 300 million rupee monument that's still being constructed after the earthquake?
Hello, my name is Ganesh Adhikari. My question is regarding, as you have mentioned in your speech earlier, that corruption is a major issue of Nepal. So, in India, we saw that Modi has taken steps to reduce the corruption. In Nepal, what steps do we need to reduce the corruption? That's my question.
Thank you. Maybe this is the last chance I get to answer the questions. Professor Bhatt has asked over the transitional justice. As you know, when the Maoists signed the comprehensive peace agreement, that time only there was a understanding or decision to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which will look after the cases of the insurgency era, and that high-level commission will find truth and provide justice and lead to reconciliation. So Nepal's case was slightly different than others. It was more like a case of South Africa, where the insurgency has ended in a compromise or in a agreement, rather than one side winning and imposing its will on the other. So basic idea is reconciliation. Find the truth, provide justice, but that should lead to reconciliation, not another conflict. So this is the idea of TRC. So TRC has now been constituted. It will do its work. We, myself being one of the leaders of the Maoist movement, I will abide by the decision of the TRC that the justice should prevail, but it shouldn't lead to another conflict. It should lead to reconciliation, peace and development in the country. So this is the spirit of the TRC, and I abide by that. And about the construction of the Republic Memorial, of course we should construct Republic Memorial, and we were just talking yesterday, I think, in the morning. In Nepal, one we call Dharara, that tower built by Vimsan Thapa, was brought down by the last year's earthquake. So people are trying to rebuild that. So instead of rebuilding the Dharara, it will be better to build a Republic Memorial. We should better utilize the scarce funds we have. So I am for that, and when I was the Prime Minister, I laid the foundation stone of a Republic Memorial, but so far it has not been constructed. It should be built sooner than later. And about Mr. Adhikari's query, what steps we should take to reduce corruption. We need a strong anti-corruption body. The present one, the CIAA, is not a autonomous body. In fact, it is very much influenced by the government in power. So our position, the Nyaya Shakti position, has been it should be directly constituted by the parliament, and it should be a high level and powerful autonomous ombudsman, Lokpal we call in Nepal. If that happens, it is directly responsible to the parliament. It will be more powerful, and it can play more effective role in checking corruption. This is one of the major departures we like to make in the current dispensation. I think this is all I can say right now. I think time is now over. Thank you so much for giving a very patient hearing, and thank you so much to the organizers and all the participants of this hearing. Thank you so much.